Okay, I think we're live everywhere. So, hello, everybody. I am HP Holo / Edie Skye, depending upon which pen name you know me from, and I write things. And welcome to the first Authors Just Talk About in a long time. And for those who are fairly new to, or who are new to this show, this is just a show that I run where authors just talk about stuff, the random topic of the evening. And this time, we are talking about giant freaking robots. Why are we talking about giant freaking robots? First of all, because I love them. But second of all, because Raconteur Press has recently released an anthology called Giant Freaking Robots. And I have the editor, what's your actual position in the company, Courtney? I forgot. Sorry.
Oh, wait, sorry. You meant the actual editor, not the guest editor.
Oh, I'm the editor-in-chief of Raconteur Press.
Okay.
My job is to corral and instruct the guest editors, which I really appreciate James being our first guest editor.
So we have editor-in-chief, guest editor, and 2 of the authors who contributed to the anthology. Well, technically 3, since I'm in it too. But what I'm going to have everyone do first, we're going to go down the line. I'm going to have everyone introduce themselves and what you write, your most recent release, and then tell us where we can find your stuff. And then we are going to go talk about giant freaking robots. So, James, let's start with you.
I am James Young. I am the guest editor for Giant Freaking Robots. I write military sci-fi as well as alternate history. My story is King of the Kaiju inside GFR. My most recent release besides GFR was Wonder No More, which is an alternate Leyte Gulf, World War II alternate history.
Courtney, you can go next. Thank you, James.
I'm Courtney Bryant. I'm the editor-in-chief. I actually don't have a story in Giant Freaking Robots. I was the first line of defense against bad stories. Certainly not the last. Mostly I write sci-fi romance under C.D. Walter. And that's on a completely different tangent. You can find my stuff on Amazon, but mostly you're going to find my work as part of Raconteur Press, Space Cowboys, Space Marines, all that fun stuff. And I actually had a story in Your Honor, I Can Explain, and another one in You See What Happened Was, which is stories of things that have gone horribly wrong because I'm a very incompetent person.
In and of the
So those are actually under my actual name, but I've got more coming out later this year.
Nice. Let's loop around to Mike.
Hi, I am Mike. I write under the name Spearman Burke. Mostly right now, I've been writing short fiction in any Raconteur Press anthology that they'll publish me in. My most recent release was in Space Marines 3, a little story called The Blotter Report. But I do have a story in Giant Killer Robots that was a blast. You can find me on Substack, Storytelling Skunkworks. Just look up Spearman Burke, and you can. I got an author page on Amazon as well.
Nice. What was the name of your story in this anthology, Mike?
Blood Redeemers.
Yes, that's right. And finally, KR.
Hey everybody, I'm Kara and I write under the pen name KR Paul. Mostly I have written within my own universe, which is the Pantheon or Limited Logistics universe. Recently just released that. And then I wrote the story Soul Steel for Giant Freaking Robots. I actually mostly write in military thrillers because that's where I got published. But giant robots, fairies versus like wizards, you name it. I want to write about it, all fantasy. Under my legal name, I tend to write a lot of leadership stuff, but since we don't talk about my day job here, and I have to, of course, put my standard caveat of all opinions are all of my own and not the DOD, so please don't hunt me down and find my PA officer.
Oh, wait. Are we supposed to say that? No.
No, the rest of us are retired. I think we're good. Yeah. Oh, no.
So, being that...
all opinions are my own, not DOD. Let's just cover that right now.
All right. So, being that the subject is giant robots, we're going to start really simple. And I want to know first of all, what your first giant robot related experience was. What show, what comic, what toy line, whatever. And then I want to know your favorite. So how did you get into giant robots to begin with? And let's start with KR.
Oh man. So I'm actually probably the worst person to ask this question.
Oh, no. We can come back
because,
around to you if you wanna
well,
wait.
I just didn't have a whole lot growing up. I did watch a bit of anime. Unfortunately, our local video store, and I mean super local, this is not your Blockbuster, they did have a decent like international area. They didn't label anything with like PG-13,
Oh, no.
so we had a brief foray into anime. If you're familiar with La Blue Girl, you'll understand why I never watched anime again. That was like
Oh,
that was
dear.
it.
I
And there,
suspected where this was going the moment you said they weren't.
I thought it was honestly, I thought it was going to be MD Geist myself.
but I have seen like a little bit of Gundam, and so I'm at least like passing familiar with it. And then I guess I love the genre. I love the idea of giant robots. I love the idea of AI, and so I think that was some of where this went. And then we can probably talk later about how my whole story came together. But if I had to pick a giant robot that I loved the best, it would be in fact the giant robot made from Spaceballs.
Yes,
I'm
that
gonna
is
give
a
you the
great
oddball
one
one.
to start
Right.
with. Love it.
It all goes up from here.
Yes. All right, Mike.
Oh man. When I was a kid, my dad was stationed in Okinawa, Japan. And I remember just turning on the local television in what I would later discover is called anime, which I just thought were really cool cartoons. Where and they were in Japanese, so I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I didn't care. They were awesome. What was it? Brave Raideen, Kikaida, Steel Jig. Oh my goodness. Cashern he wasn't a giant robot, but he fought a lot of robots.
Yeah.
Just stuff like that, and in the it was called the Garinja, the 5 Rangers were always, which became the Power Rangers in the United States, were always fighting a giant monster or a giant robot. It was Robot of the Week in Japan, and that's what I remember. And then as a teenager, Matt Cross and Robotech were on, all afternoon. So that, was the early influence. As far as a favorite, I think the best one's already been taken. I don't know. I think the idea of just climbing into a giant mech and piloting it is just, who wouldn't want to do that?
There's a certain magic in it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, we've got Froeby in the comments. So hello, Froeby. And by the way, for people who are watching, if you have any questions for any of the authors, put them in the comments, and we will answer them to the best of our ability. So let's see here. All right, my screen did a thing. All right, coming back around. So, all right, Courtney.
Okay, so I guess I'm gonna be a little off because my first introduction to giant robots was Anne McCaffrey's the brain ships. I really thought they were a really cool idea, and they're still one of my favorites. Of course, I grew up on Mighty Morphin Power Rangers every day after school. That was always fun. I love Transformers, and honestly, I think my favorites. Gosh, the maid from Spaceballs is the obvious answer. But actually, I really love the ones for Pacific Rim.
Oh yes.
Oh yes, all the Jagers.
That movie is such a blessing.
They're fighting kaiju. Like, how can you not love those? They're like the coolest thing ever.
Nothing in my life ever made me quite as mad though as the sequel. They did franchise so dirty with the sequel. I was so sad. I was mad for like a week after that sequel.
I have not seen the sequel for that reason.
You're not
missing
anything,
movie
man.
That has John Boyega in it, and another one that also completely wastes his acting talent because he is great. The rest of the movie is not. But yeah, it's. I have opinions about it. But James, your turn.
So I'm going to take it way back. My first exposure to giant robot would be Jet Jaguar versus Godzilla. As a 3-year-old watching in the afternoon, it would always come on base with Whiteman Air Force Base. So Yeah, that was we'd watch it in the afternoon at Babysitters. But if we're going with cartoon giant robot, well, I'm going to go ahead and form Blazing Sword and talk about Five Lions. So going with, of course, Voltron. And then favorite, well, I mean, I'm not wearing the Skull Squadron t-shirt for my health. Let's just put it that way. Big Robotech fan of the books, the movies. I cried like a baby when Roy Fokker died. One of those things. Yeah, just the mindlessness of it all. That's Courtney, who has now been in 2 interviews with me. My goal is every time we're in an interview, I'm going to have a different Robotech shirt on, so people will understand just how crazy the Robotech love is.
Yes. See, I got a comment. Laura. Yes, Oliver, I was meaning to simulcast on Facebook, and for some reason my thing is saying unable to connect, and I'm not entirely sure why. So I will be fiddling with that while you guys answer questions. But yeah, I'm not entirely sure why it is suddenly not simulcasting on Facebook. But we are live on YouTube, so that's good. All right, so I will answer the question for myself. So my first giant robot experience, I think I actually have the newest one because I was of the Toonami generation when it comes to anime. Mm-hmm. And so mine was absolutely Gundam Wing. And I love all the Gundams. I got my Wing Gundam shirt on. It's my whole thing. I have a giant robot series out. I actually didn't introduce my own books, but anyone who watches this show knows who I am. But for the short version, as Edie Skye, I write the Titan Mage series, which is basically giant robots and action and spicy scenes. And so if you like that, that is my giant robot series.
Don't forget the magic.
In that series, there are all sorts of, there are Easter eggs, there are Gundam Easter eggs and Gurren Lagann Easter eggs and everything hidden all over that. So Gundam was my introduction. But I actually have to say that in terms of my favorite giant robot, I'm not a fan of the Evangelion series, the Neon Genesis Evangelion. It's too dark for me. But the Eva units, I absolutely love those designs because they're so sporty and unconventional for giant robots, and I love that weirdness about them. And so that's even though I only kind of watch the show under duress whenever my husband wants to, those are my favorite. Those are my favorite robots. So now everyone's answered their basic question. Now we're going to get into talking about the anthology. So first, I want to know, how did this anthology come about? And I guess this is one for Courtney and James primarily, and then we'll get to the individual stories.
James stood still in a room with me and Jonna. That's. And that's.
I mean, I'm not a cheap date. They did have to take me to dinner, but yeah.
It was a fantastic dinner too. It was a. Would you like to describe the bar that they took you to ask you to do this project?
I was told that we're going to a random bar down there in not Nashville. Wait,
Chattanooga.
Yeah, thank you. Chattanooga after LibertyCon, I was like, oh, okay, well, sure, yeah, let's do dinner. So we walk into the establishment, got a few strange looks, and I'm just like, okay, well, that's normal. I am in the South. Oh, no. And then found out that this was a gay Irish biker bar, and that's why everyone was giving me the weird look, because clearly
why
not
Irish?
I mean, so I would have blended in.
Yes, but me, I probably look like 5'0", and Law Dog, of course, looks like 5'0", so it was clearly there was his wife, and so I didn't find this out until later. I'm having the chicken tenders. I mean, I'm just like, okay, whatever, and we hashed out what's supposed to be 3 anthologies. I am enough of a realist to realize we're going to end up with more than 3. We already have a couple commitments, but it was supposed to be 1 mecha. And that was like, we talk about in the military, a throwaway course of action. That was a throwaway course of action. I was like, oh, I'll do a mecha anthology. He goes,
Hold my beer cola.
Wait. And you want to do that one first. Okay, that's a bad. That's all right. Well, I'll try. And, we got some folks lined up. And but that's how it came about this one. And there's going to be Who's Tracks and Sabers, which is alternate history, cavalry, and mounted warfare. And then big ones, which is World War II. and I suspect that that'll be the 3. That's probably going to become. What are we up to so far? 5, 6.
We have a 4th one scheduled. Giant Stompin' Robots is we've added to the schedule because I got a story from Edie Skye and Jacob Holo, and like how do I not take both of them? So
right.
I really so we're committed to 4. There will likely be 6. However, the next 2 are not going to be this year. They're probably going to be next year.
Yes.
Because we were going to do, if we're Raconteur Press, we were going to do 24 and 24, and we've hit 29. And by God, I am not doing 30. I have put my foot down. We're not doing 30.
Between anthologies and Jacob's Bane releases and our indie releases, Jacob and I have 11 or 12 books coming out this year, and just 11 is tiring already. Like, it's already hard and I'm already tired.
Yeah.
Oh, and there's more for me besides the anthology. So.
But you've got a lot of anthologies coming out. Do we have a release date for the second Giant Robot anthology yet?
Jonna and I had to. We were scheduling that. I don't know if we've locked down the date yet. I can ping her and ask if we've got an official one, but we may not have an official date yet.
You'll have to let me know when you decide so I can share it around, because I'm looking forward to that one. Well,
absolutely.
Of course, I'm looking.
Yeah, we are going to have some ringers in that one. Hopefully a big ringer, but we'll see about that. He was working on a schedule, but we already have one of the gentlemen who's already working on BattleTech's current world. With Catalyst Labs, so he's a BattleTech vet, so he's got a short story, and then there are a couple other folks that are recognizable names. So looking forward to the second one.
Oh, that's going to be sweet. So now let's talk about the anthology itself in terms of stories. So I want to hear. We're just going to go down the line. I want to know about your stories. Tell us first off what they're about. And then we will get into discussing what inspired them, what made you take the direction you took in it. So let's start with Mike. We haven't started with Mike yet.
Oh, mine. Let's see. My story of Blood Redeemers is not so much about the giant robots, but the poor slobs who have to fight the giant robots. And it's they're a penal battalion of criminals and thugs and politically and ideologically suspect men who they're basically a light infantry outfit taking on a mercenary company of meched up mercenary company who are coming to take the manufactory away from them, and they're expected to defend it with their very lives to earn their freedom, right, through victory. And it's because I always like the poor dumb grunt kind of story, and here they are with these heavy duty machines coming at them, and they have to do a lot of clever things in order to defeat them.
You capture the grunginess of it well. Like, whenever the blows hit, you can feel it as the reader. I read it just earlier, just a few hours ago before we came on.
Why, thank you. There's more where that came from. No.
God, I hope so.
But yeah, it's a solid story. It was, I think yours was the second in the anthology, and then KR, yours was the first, right? So we had, between the two of you, had a really solid start. So let's see here. So KR, speaking of whom, talk about yours next.
Thank you. What is my story about? Mine is, the big picture is that it is cat and mouse across one big battlefield. But as you're reading through it, you're getting little flashbacks here and there, and you're realizing that there is more going on than very Transformers. There's more that meets the eye, right? Like,
oh, yes.
You're getting a little bit of the backstory of, like, who is my protagonist, who is my antagonist, and why are they locked in battle today, and why is something off? So if nobody's read it yet, I won't give you what the ending is, but the whole time you're getting time slices of today's battle and then 7 years ago, and why this one battle is so important to these two individuals, and why this is the one that really matters. And of course, I love the idea of, the victorious one is, walking off the battlefield and their giant mechs stomping along, explosions in the background, and I love being able to capture that. And then you get to that final scene and you realize, oh, this is actually like sweet and kind of cute. Aw. So what inspired this story that it's not really like a meet cute, but like it's big robots and epic battle and lasers and cannons and giant mechs versus little mechs, and where Mike's got like the grunts look. Let's just say my profession comes out quite a bit with all the aerial battle. So I drew on my own experiences to be able to describe a lot of flying mechs. But where did it really come from? So here's the thing. I'm a sucker for a trope. I love a good trope. I hate it if it's done poorly. But if you can pick one trope and just execute it flawlessly, like I think it's perfect. And I had read, it was like one of those author prompts a long time ago of, friends to lovers, enemies to lovers kind of thing, but hey, they're soulmates, and the soulmate part is like you try to stab your soulmate and you realize they're the one person in the entire world you cannot physically harm. And I went, that's cool. Heckin' cool. Let's do that. And so I'd actually been working on a version of that story for a really long time, and somebody here, James, had pushed, hey, like you should really submit a story for this. And I'm like, I don't have anything. I don't write about mechs. Like this is outside of my comfort zone. Truly it is. And then I went, if I just reskinned this story that I'm already writing, I could get there. And so that's where it is. It's the enemies to lovers, but like you're my soulmate. And so that's kind of where the title came from, of Soul Steel. They're soulmates in a body of steel.
So, yes, there was harassing. I freely admit to that. This is outside my comfort zone.
I'll show the receipts. Don't you make me.
Oh, no. The world might know I harassed someone. So, yeah, no, that 100% was, well, I don't know if I can, put something in there. And I'm like,
I do appreciate it though, because again, you push me outside of my comfort zone. I realized that this is something that I can write about. And I had like 20 people ask me after the book came out, hey, so you're going to turn this into a full novel, right? I'm like, well, I guess I am now.
Yeah. Oh no, I knew that was coming. I knew that was coming from watching it happen on Twitter. I was like, oh yeah, this is going to be fun.
I can't remember, Mike. Did you get to talk about what inspired yours? I've got comments popping up everywhere.
Oh, are they? Here's the truth.
Distracted.
I was over Christmas. I was watching Kelly's Heroes, and I thought, what would this story look like in outer space? And then instead of just a bunch of heroes, I made them a bunch of criminals. And ideally, the story continues where they find something in one of the mechs, some kind of data file that's very valuable, and then they decide to have a jailbreak. Mm-hmm. But I only told the story up to so far for the purposes of the anthology. And, the idea of why are they fighting and even though they're prisoners, why are they risking their lives for what they're doing, for this, I don't know, government or institution that is imprisoning them. So there's a couple of different themes going on there. I like the idea of trying to find your identity, trying to figure out why you're doing what you're doing. Mm-hmm. So that's another piece in there. But yeah, it's Clint Eastwood's fault mostly.
I like that.
When all else fails, blame Clint.
Yes.
All right. Well, I mean, yeah, it's like they couldn't knock over a gold bank in the future. I mean, but.
I like the structure of your story, though. You absolutely nail those sort of grungy, like criminal but not really criminal kind of guys. I like that. James, your turn.
So it was all your and Jacob's fault.
That's
so
true.
once upon a time,
I just finished reading the story. Yup.
Once upon a time, in order to get people on my reading list.
By the way.
What was that?
You gave me emotions because yours was the last story I read like 5 minutes before I logged on here, and I was like crying a little bit. It was so good. But I'm not giving away spoilers, but my husband and I are Tuckerized in it, and it's
Yes.
great.
So many moons ago, I used to do contests in order to build my mailing list. Did not know Jacob and HP at all. Did not know them from Adam and Eve. I think it was my first Liberty Con. They got into the contest, and Jacob won. So this has been like,
Years
like
in the
probably
making.
8 years ago.
Yeah.
And always I was gonna. So whenever someone would win the contest, I would name a warship after them. So like basically, usually it'd be a destroyer. So I'd name a destroyer after them, and there'd be a little blurb on how that happened.
Mhm.
So fast forward, however many years it's been later, I was like, well, that's funny. There's a way I killed him in the paragraph. I think I'm going to modify that somewhat. And I will give away a slight spoiler. This is the first time I've killed a fellow author's spouse in like a short story. So, yeah.
We're honored.
Yeah, when you know that you've gotten to God levels when you're like killing other people in the anthology. I mean, you know, that's as my readers say, he's out of control. And I mean, it's in the universe. Basically, this happens. There's the First Contact, which is the original novel in the whole universe,
Mhm.
and then it takes up where basically they're commissioning the destroyer. That's the end point. And yes, HP and Jacob did get Tuckerized. I made sure I checked with them, like, we got a part where they're together, like, hey, did I get your guys' mannerisms right? And, you know, HP was like, well, that was kind of eerie.
Well, you've known us for 8 years by this point.
Yes, so
But
that's
young.
yeah, that was pretty much what inspired mine, is I needed to talk about the backstory of my mecha, my universe, and I also needed to fulfill a contest vow, so.
Yes. You did a very good job. I approve. As for my story, mine is set inside my Titan Mage universe. It's called I'm in Love with a Helicopter. And basically, the main characters, they get summoned. There's this weird giant robot causing problems, and they are bounty hunters, and one of them has a giant robot. So it's like, okay, let's go fight this robot and get paid. And it ends up being a specialized transforming robot that can transform into this helicopter form. And there ends up being, of course, more to the story than just straight up trouble. But the story itself was inspired by a specific section of Armored Core 6. If you have played, well, any FromSoft game, they're notorious for being hard. And Armored Core 6 is no exception. In fact, you get to the tutorial section, and the tutorial section had me looking up how to change the difficulty of the game. And in this tutorial, you're basically fighting off this giant helicopter and your giant robot. And the best way to defeat it is just to fly up and punch it, by the way, even if you have guns and whatnot. But I played this tutorial so much and hated it at first. And then eventually I played it so much I kind of got Stockholm syndrome from it. It was like, this is actually kind of fun, because that's the way those games are set up. You scream at them for hours, and then suddenly you figure out the trick, and it becomes crazy fun. And so I was like, you know what, this tutorial is a part of my life now. I need to pay some kind of reference to it in my writing, because I like to sprinkle Easter eggs all over the place in the Titan Mage series and whatnot. And so the story eventually, or basically, came from me asking, how can I refer to this tutorial in world somehow? And it ends up being very subtle in the story itself, but that was the origin of it. So Courtney, did you have anything to add to this? I know you don't have a short story in it, but did you? A question I can actually ask you, and James for that matter, is how do you go through the process of selecting what goes into the anthology? Like, what do you look for in stories?
So one of the things that I look for, I have a multi-step process for this, but I actually handed James most of it. The first step was to go through and see if it was readable. But when I'm looking for stories, one of the things, because I know I'm going to be spending several weeks with a book from beginning to end, and I'm going to be reading through it 8 or 9 times, as I'm looking for a story that I want to read again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for something that I'm enjoying, and that if I read it again, if I have to read it again tomorrow, I'm not going to want to claw my eyes out. So there's that's like it's not technical at all. It's very much a personal taste kind of thing. But I look for stories that I know hits major tropes, which KR did wonderfully.
Oh yes.
Which I recognize, and I'm like, oh, I
know this one.
I know this one. I love little spoilers and stuff like that. Like if you know what the trope is, then like you know exactly what's going to happen, and it's just the best like cookie when it actually comes up. So that's what I look for, and I want to find stories that mesh well together, and put them in they're not all exactly the same, but that the transition from the one to the next isn't super jarring. I do like my my usual example is I'm going to put like pistachio next to vanilla and not pistachio next to Rocky Road. Right. They're like completely different flavors when you have one after the other. So, and I know James had his own process. So
pretty much and they got on me a little bit because because we had so many stories, and I thought that we were actually going to just stop at one, and I'm like, the only fair way to do this is when I get to 10, I stop. So I was just like, I can't pick and choose. I need to pretty much do them in the order they came in or people I talked to, and go from there. Which kind of embarrassing because there was somebody that we kind of recruited for it that I didn't get to, and then like later, John is like, and I'm like, I'm sorry, I did it in the order I came in. Order came in when I talked to them.
A lot of our authors know that though, so they know that if they didn't get in the first one, we're probably going to do a second one.
Yeah,
and that's so pretty much that's how I went. If there was a problem with it, I mean, I'm kind of ruthless as an editor. In previous styles, I've been called the hammer because I'm not doing it. I can't spend a whole lot of time fixing something that should have gone to a writer group or a beta reader,
right?
Because this is the side gig to the writing gig, and I have my own timeline for things, so it's very much a case of either if we already had a story that was similar, or I basically in the first 2 pages was like, no. I mean, I was like, well, we can figure out how we want to coach this back to somebody, but I got to move on. And and then I did because I just know weird things happen to people. I went 3 stories beyond that, and that's basically what it was. It was literally in the order that they came in.
Nice. So you had a lot of stuff for this one, man. All right.
Oh yeah, so, I'm dreading what's going to happen with Hoops.
Yeah, it's a really fun anthology. What I've read through. So now we can't talk about a giant robot anthology without talking about the giant robots in the stories. So for everyone who contributed a story, I want to know specifically how you chose what kind of robots you were going to write, and maybe what other stories or what other kinds of mechs inspired those. Like there's a wide variety of mech types in this anthology, and so yeah. Let's see, who wants to go first? Who have I not picked on recently? I actually can't remember who I've picked on at all. Let's do KR. You're first.
Okay. So I'm over here. I'm like typing out what was the question so I don't forget just in case. Okay. So I guess it was really like how did you choose the robots that you wrote and like what inspired them? So I'll be really honest. The robots that I wrote actually represent my husband and I. Maybe not so much like in the size, right? Because the male the male who has a robot, his is like the Tony Stark Iron Man suit, right? Like it's small. It's more a mecha like suit rather than like giant robot. There may have been a conversation back and forth with a couple of my beta readers that were like, for a giant robot, these aren't very giant. Like maybe you want to add a meter or 2 or 5 to what you're writing. But they definitely really like kind of reflected us. So to be very honest, like the look and the feel of them. Like mine is large and it's purple and it's gleaming and it's shiny, but kind of also patched together.
Mhm.
And she's like really strong and she's got all kinds of weaponry and she's very tactically sound. And then there's the much more like put together, cobbled together, it's like dark gray and steel look, and very sleek, like very just body sized Iron Man kind of suit. And so I loved the kind of like David and Goliath feel, which is
Yeah.
really funny because when you look at my husband and I, like he's very much the tall one, I'm not. So I thought it was a funny juxtaposition there, but that's really where like my robots kind of came from. So yes, I get it. One of mine is in the world of giant robots, he's a short king, and we stay on our short kings. And then like, and then the one that's I guess more reflective of me and my personality and like all the purple and everything, right? Like giant beefy ass robot, because I joke about, because I'm a power lifter and bodybuilder, I basically look like a tank on legs, and that's exactly what this robot was. It was
Nice.
a tank on legs.
Yeah, one thing I really liked about your robots is that even though they're on the small side compared to other giant robots, they're still they still have a very visceral presence in the story. Like I don't like stompy, or I don't like giant robot stories where you can't feel the big stomps, but you can absolutely feel the power in these robots. I think there's a particular description where I think the main character, her you describe the way the being inside the mech suit like physically affects her body, I think. And that's not a detail that you usually get with a lot of giant robot stories, or at least a lot of the ones I'm familiar with, the more the Japanese anime style. It's like you're in the robot and you're being cool and you punch stuff and then you get out of the robot and it gets fixed. There's not a lot where you see the wear and tear on the pilot unless that's a plot point, and I really liked that kind of detail in yours.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I always watch like Iron Man, right? And he's getting beat up and thrown around, and I'm like, man, physics and momentum are still present.
Yeah,
Like
there's still a
if he
thing.
comes to a sudden terrestrial halt, like physics and momentum are gonna have their say. Like I can only envision that underneath the beautiful like Gucci suits, Tony Stark must just have bruises like everywhere, right?
Uh-huh. All right, Mike.
Oh man, I had a bit of a similar experience as KR Paul. My writing group, the Alpha Mercs, they're all listening. We actually, three people from my writing group have a story in this anthology. T.C. Ross and Seth Taylor as well.
Cool.
But as I was writing my story, I think it was Seth. It was like, hey, this is a giant robots anthology, and mine kind of started off as up armored suits more than giant robots. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna add like 3 to 5 meters of these guys, and let's see. I put a lot of drones in support. There wasn't a lot of light infantry support because essentially my mechs are walking, tanks. They're just platforms that shoot rockets and guns. And so I had a lot of drone support. And then the Marine Corps had released that video of that dog drone.
Mm-hmm.
Around that time we were writing the stories. And I was like, that's cool. So I'll call them coyotes. And each mech has their own coyote
Yes.
things that they release onto the battlefield, right? And those things are running around, shooting up the place.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just a lot of it. So it's not just stomping machines. There's just all this stuff going on.
There's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah. And that's kind of what influenced mine. It didn't make sense because the sad reality is giant robots just aren't feasible, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we've already invented the perfect thing. It's called a tank.
Yep.
With the current technology, but yeah.
Yeah. Right. But so that's kind of what it was. I was like, what can I add to this to make it more, I don't know if realistic is the word, but I don't know, interesting and a little different than just a giant robot kicking over buildings and whatnot. Yeah. And I wanted to make it more up close and personal, how these guys were dealing with, this phalanx of armor that was walking at them.
Yeah, I mean, it basically comes across as military sci-fi, and it does it very well.
Oh, thank you. Did you hear that, everyone? No.
Look, you're gonna buy the anthology anyway. So, I mean, if you're here, you might as well pony up the money.
I actually need to put that in the comments so people can access it. But yeah, so those of you who are watching on YouTube, if you have friends that are trying to access it through Facebook, let them know to just come to YouTube. Because for whatever reason, Facebook will not connect, and I'm afraid to do much more than I've already done because I'm afraid I will inadvertently end the stream. So I got no idea what's going on there because I haven't had that problem before. But just tell people to go to Facebook, and thanks for those who have already shared links. But where was I going? James, it's your turn.
Okay, so basically mine, I mean, it was already coming into a universe. You have a lot of sectionalism and factionalism in the military, so that's part of the problem. And that's kind of where my story is set in is you're trying to bring mecha into the main armed services as is. And politically, there's kind of a setup for that to happen, but there's a lot of everybody having their personal piece of the pie that they don't want mecha to show up. And so it's basically the story of, well, how do we end up at least with some trial mecha? Because down the road, there's gonna, in the main novel, their mecha are gonna be very important how everything goes on. My inspiration, of course, were the Veritex from Robotech and Macross. I make no bones about that. I also like some of the battle mechs from BattleTech. So, I mean, it is pretty much just a military sci-fi mecha story set in a larger military sci-fi universe.
So mine, I actually opted to write a fantasy mech, and for the exact reason that mechs, in terms of sci-fi, tend to be unrealistic. And there are a lot of people who won't pick up mech sci-fi solely because they don't find the giant robot even remotely believable. And so in the Titan Mage universe, it's fantasy. They're powered by magic, stuff like that. There's they tend to be 2 stories tall in this setting. But in terms of specific inspirations, I am a huge Escaflowne fan and am perpetually mad that Escaflowne has kind of been forgotten as an anime. And so it's for those who are unfamiliar with it, it's a fantasy anime that, if I recall correctly, was actually released by the same animation studio that does Gundam. But it basically blends epic fantasy with mecha, and it's the coolest thing ever, and I love it. So I went somewhat with that vibe, but another really huge influence was actually Magic Knight Rayearth, which is not necessarily a mecha series. It's more of a magical girl series, but the magical girls eventually get mechs in it, and they basically look like giant suits of armor rather than machines, but I just thought they were the coolest things ever. And so my mechs very much have that vibe, and there's some, I wouldn't call it pseudoscience that goes into it. Like they do have specific designs where they've got Titan cores that they build their mechs around, and they need void essence to power it and stuff like that. But it's ultimately they're powered by magic, so I don't have to do all that much thinking about the mechanics because I'm bad at it. But and for me, like my husband writes the stats for this series because he's an engineer and that's what he does well. And I tend to focus more on characters. I basically use the mechs as vehicles to tell stories about interesting characters. Though of course there are there's great action in it. I'm in love with the helicopter. Primarily centers around the relationship between Ryan, who is the mech pilot, and Sevas, who is his engineer, and they're somewhat fraught but still ultimately brotherly relationship. And as Sevas prepares Ryan to go up against this one mech. And they're fun characters to write, primarily because oh no, Mike went somewhere. Where'd he go?
He said his camera was freezing, but we could still see him moving.
Let's see. Oh, he's back. Let's see.
Yeah.
Mike, you're back. You vanished for a bit there. All right.
Yeah, scared me.
We're glad to have you. But
You hit a button.
I didn't touch anything.
I ultimately, the entire series I wrote as this giant homage to giant robots, and so there's a lot of anime references. There's a lot of just giant robot ridiculousness in it, and it comes through in the short story as well. So I mean, you got a transforming robot in it. I mean, You can't lose with that. All right, let's see. Let me check and see what time we have. Oh, we're down to 15 minutes already. So this has been fun. It's gone by really fast. And again, for those who are watching, we got a really good crowd today. If you have any questions for us, feel free to put them in the chat. We will begin to wind down close to 9. But here's a question that I actually meant to ask earlier, and it completely slipped my mind. So in terms of the styles of giant robot that you personally like, there's lots of different kinds. You have the sort of 1970s Japanese super robot style, which kind of which they're basically fun, ridiculous robots. You have the real robot, which is basically Gundam, military sci-fi style stuff that's a little bit more serious. And both of those are Japanese. But then on the other side, you have Western style giant robots, which in my experience tend to be more rugged and more practically military focused. Like they're not nearly as fanciful looking, if fanciful is the right word. So my question is, what style do you prefer? Let's see. We'll go with James to start for now.
I prefer the Japanese style. I like the fact that you can basically have robot or mecha that are Swiss Army knife.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you would actually end up with more Western style mecha, like with as advancements of military goes. But my personal, I just like the fact that, oh, I'm a fighter jet, and I need to be like a robot. Mm-hmm. And then I can go like half and half when I need some speed or whatever else. So that's just my personal preference. I mean, I like both styles. I mean, I'm an avid BattleTech player, so to me, BattleTech is more the Western style of the plotting warfare, fighting back in the 31st century.
That's exactly what I was thinking, like BattleTech or Mech Warrior.
Yeah, but I'm much more a Gundam style fan.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, KR, how about you?
All right. Well, as we already know, like I'm not huge into all the lore. I did realize, like as we started talking, I was like, I don't know, like do Transformers count? Because I was that kid that had the F-14, like Tomcat Transformer, like right, it was an F-14, and there was a So if anything, like you can guess, that's kind of where my like inspiration, everything was. Yeah. But obviously, with my background, I'm very much the military focused and. Well, I would say my mechs are very military focused, and the like kind of very serious type of story. You know, obviously it's all over. That's just overlacing like the character driven story, like you talk about. That I love. I think almost everything I write, it's the story of the characters, and then it's really just whatever like thin veneer of a genre I throw on top.
Mike.
Oh man, the mechs in my story I think are more Western gun platform lumbering type of things, but there's something really slick about a Gundam style mech that appeals to me. It just looks cool, right? You know, it's like getting to drive your parents' car instead of your car.
Yes.
Right? You know, so because that's a tough question. Because like you said earlier, like I really love the Evangelion mechs because they're kind of cool and lean. If they'd ever get to the fight, like someone recommended that to me, and I was like, cool, I'll watch it. And it's like 20 minutes of like a 14-year-old upset that his dad doesn't love him. And in 5 minutes, a giant robot fighting. I'm like, dude, who cares about your dad? You get to pilot a giant mech. Stop crying.
That's the primary reason that I cannot get into Evangelion, because I'm like, dude, you have a robot that your dad is telling you to get into, sir. I would do this. Then why is this a problem? And it's like, I understand that trauma, which is another discussion for that series.
That's how you know he loves you. He's letting you drive this damn thing.
I mean... It got mentioned in the introduction and how it got mentioned. I'm just saying that was not a coincidence.
The primary thing that turned me off about Evangelion is no giant robot fan watches a giant robot show to not see you get in the giant robot. And I've actually seen, like, there's been some arguments that Evangelion is actually not a mecha show, primarily because it is more of a character show, which I feel like that could go both ways, because it does have really iconic mechs, and I think it was made as a not a commentary on the genre, but definitely a bending of the genre. But I find Evangelion intellectually interesting, but I really don't find it an exciting watch.
I mean, it's got lots of hardcore fans. The number of people
yeah.
that I know who are, every time you go to a convention, you see the number of people in Evangelion, like the pilot suits. So,
oh yeah, like we own it all. It's my husband's collection, but I only watch it when he just wants to. But yeah. So as far as my preferences go, I'm Japanese style Gundam all the way. They look slick and they look cool, and there's no like equivalent that I can see in real life. And like whereas Western style mechs, like they come closer to looking realistic, and it's like, yeah, I could eventually see us having something like that one day. But Gundam is, even though the storytelling can be very brutal and very like war as hell, there's something ultimately fanciful about the machines themselves, and I think it's the coolest thing. So
it's all fun and games until the glowing sword comes out.
Yeah. And then it's still fun, just more people die.
Then you know it's serious.
All right. The missiles ain't working. We're going to melee.
All right, Courtney, you somewhere on the screen you sent me that there is a release date, and okay, you said John has said mid-October for Giant Stomping Robots.
Yes, mid-October Giant Stomping Robots. We're looking at October 25th. I don't think that's set in stone, but it's we've outlined the chisel marks.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, mid to late October. So
awesome.
Yes,
that's there's a lot of mileage between here and there. Was part of what I mean when Don and I talked last weekend. Mm-hmm. That's kind of why I had to lay out like, okay, we have 9 months left in this year, and there are 2 other anthologies in those 9 months.
Yes. And did you say there were going to be more than 2 at some point? We were talking about so many anthologies that they all started to blend together.
I think there's going to end up being 3.
Nice.
We have not committed to anything, but that's
but I
them to go.
You've got a lot of volumes between, or a lot of anthologies between here and there.
Yeah, we'd have to. I mean, I don't want to start tossing good stories out the airlock, basically.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where we're at. Is we'd be tossing good stories out the airlock.
Yeah. All right. A question I actually meant to ask earlier. I have a lot of those this time around. So for the short story authors, have you written about mechs in your previously published work? I know some have mentioned it before, but let's. And I know James has, obviously. But Mike and KR, have you?
I have not. Actually, in my Space Marine story, there is another giant robot that they end up fighting, but I'm not sure if that's just coincidence because it wasn't, everything else is space cowboys and space cats. I'm sorry, I'm ashamed.
It is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah, and yeah, if you read it, it'll give you diabetes. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Now I'm intrigued. What's the title of this again?
The cat one?
Yes.
It's called Chosen One. And it's actually characters that appear in my Space Cowboys thing. I just wrote it to get it into Moggy's, frankly, to have a cat scene in there.
Yes.
So I have to apologize to my ancestors, yeah.
So the other 2 anthologies that I've worked on have all been under my legal name, and they all have been very sci-fi focused. I use sci-fi to tell leadership stories, and absolutely no giant mechs. Let's see how to I guess there's really no way to say it without probably unmasking myself a little bit. But my other one talks about Ultron versus Vision. And why human heart has to stay in military AI, right? So I guess you could kind of go I have written about machines before, but not the giant Gundam sized mechs or anything. In my full published novels, it's either we're combining fantasy with military thriller, and then the other one that I'm working on is again, pick a trope and do it excellently, a werewolf romance. So definitely no mechas there.
Yeah.
You totally had me thinking you were going to say a werewolf romance with mechas,
No,
though.
that's
And I
I
was
my
mean,
mind went,
now I
yeah.
have to take notes because maybe I should. No, I won't do that. The epic crossover event of the century.
the strangest crossover, but I would read it.
Ghostbuster rules are starting to come into effect here about crossing the streams. Do you
right.
see a portal to another dimension? No? Okay, we're not crossing these streams. The reason why HP knows that there's mecha in my other novel is because she did a review of an unproven concept, or as she called it, Titanic in space.
Yeah, that was a fun review to write.
Yeah, so yes, there is mecha, my full-scale novel, an unproven concept.
Well, we are getting close to 9 o'clock, and this has been a fun hour. So thank you guys for joining me. Once again, for those who are watching, this has been Authors Just Talk About Giant Freaking Robots. Before we actually head off, though, I'm going to have all the authors introduce themselves again, say what their most recent work is, where we can find you again. And for everyone watching, go read Giant Freaking Robots. The download link is both in the comments and in the event description wherever you're watching. It's a really fun anthology, and yeah. So James, have at it. You guys will close us out.
So again, I'm James Young. I write military sci-fi and alternate history. My most recent release, besides this one, is Wonder No More, which is an alternate world or Leyte Gulf. It's a standalone. My usual World War II alternate history is The Usurper's War, which is 3 books and a couple of short stories. You can find me on Amazon. You can also find me at jamesyoungauthor.com.
See, Courtney?
I'm Courtney Bryant. I'm the editor-in-chief for Raconteur Press. You'll find my most recent publication of my writing in You See What Happened Was. I'm on Amazon as C.V. Walter for my sci-fi romance. And we've got more anthologies coming out, so watch our Substack. It's a raconteurpress.substack. Mike can fix me on this. .com.
Just look for Raconteur Press on Substack. You'll find it.
That's it.
All right, Mike.
My name's Mike. I write under the name Spearman Burke. Lately, I've been working on a lot of short fiction. Apparently, I'm a Mill SF author. And I didn't mention this before, but I'm also an associate editor with Raconteur Press. And I stood still too long is what happened.
It happens.
Yeah. My latest short story is out in Space Marines 3, Raconteur Press. It's a story called Blotter Report. My story for Giant Freaking Robots was Blood Redeemers. And most of my stuff you can find with Raconteur Press. I've got some professional articles written with the U.S. Naval Institute under my real name, Michael S. Burke. And you can find me on Amazon on my author page. And you can find me on Substack, Storytelling Skunkworks with Spearman Burke.
And
Mike, what did you do for proceedings?
I wrote articles on leadership. I'm a retired Marine Corps Sergeant Major, so I wrote a lot of just kind of NCO type level leadership articles for USNI.
In my nonfiction life, I've also written for proceedings, but that we can talk offline on that one.
all right, KR.
All right. Hey, and so I am KR Paul. That is my pen name that I go by. You can find me on Amazon under KR Paul. I write the Pantheon series, which was recently re-released. I have also under my legal name written some leadership stories within anthologies. I think it's Power Up and oh my gosh, I'm totally blanking on the first
Boldly
one.
Go.
Boldly Go. Those are the 2 that are written under my legal name. You can probably figure out who I am from the initials. And those are both like leadership through a lens of sci-fi. But I focus mostly on military thrillers when I'm doing fiction. Apparently also the werewolf romance novel genre. We'll see what happens with that. And hopefully my 3rd book will come out this fall. So
nice. And I am HP Holo / Edie Skye. You can find all my stuff on Amazon. My most recent release actually came out this week, and it's called Blood Knight. It is not, or Blood Knight Vampire Slayer. It is not about giant robots, but it is about hot people slaying vampires. So if that's your jam, go for it.
Look for a succubus.
Yes, the main or not the main character, but the succubus on the cover has sold a lot of books. So it was a very good launch week. But again, thank you everyone for joining me for this hour. This was a whole lot of fun, and thank you everyone who watched. So we will see you whenever I do this again next time. But until then,